everyone, we're back here in my workshop for the Skills Centre at home. I hope you've had a nice weekend. Today starts the first of 5 sessions in the workshop. At the end of this first presentation, we're going to give you a run through of the schedule as to what we're going to see every day. I hope not to disappoint you too much, but today's going to be no turning. We're going to prepare for the end of the week. And because epoxy has become fairly popular nowadays, we're going to look at doing some casting for some epoxy resin. What we're going to do, hopefully at the end of the week together, is make a smaller version, not quite as big as this, but a smaller version of one of these half timber, half epoxy bowls. Now, really, this is done as a filler for the timber. So we're not trying to hide the timber, we're trying to show it off. This would have been a bowl blank that was very difficult to use. It had a big void in one side and the other side was pretty much cut all the way through. So what I thought we could do, we can go through the whole casting process. So this is, if any video is going to throw up some questions, this will be the one. So I've got my 2 sons behind the camera. They're going to take it in turns and asking me questions if any come through. So please ask. I'm going to field some questions as well as we get to them. So as I think of a question, then I'll ask myself and tell you. So there's going to be all sorts of things like bubbles, pressure pots, how we mix, pigments, all those sorts of things. So please ask questions. I've got some examples of finished work here as well. We will be a little bit more active in this one, so we're going to be moving around the workshop a little bit. I've got a trip to the bandsaw to make. We're going to look at the different projects the rest of the week as well. So stick with us. Any problems, just let me know and we can write them straight away. So let's begin, let's start. So we're going to make a bowl blank, and resin, you may have discovered already, is a fairly expensive material. I'm going to use the eco-epoxy resin today, the flow cast. The flow cast is your actual casting resin. Now there is a difference between this and the other product from eco-epoxy, which is the UV epoxy. Now the UV epoxy is more of your countertop resin. This is actual casting resin, so we can cast to a certain thickness. We're going to be casting to about 50 mil, and this is the timber that we're going to cast. So this is a bur oak. Because of the cost though, I don't want to just pour the resin over it and then cut it up into sections. So I'm going to make a circular mould to suit. This is one I've prepared earlier just to get us all ready. There's certain thing that's needed to dry. So I'm going to cut the piece of timber, fit it in there, and then I can only need to mix and cast the right amount of resin, for that project. So we're going to go for the process of making that first. We've got lathes. It's a wood turning video. We've got lathes, so we're going to use that to our advantage. So let's start. Don't forget, start those questions coming through when you have them. So let's start. And Finley and Charlie, just shout at me the questions if you see any. Just stop me at any time. So this is just a piece of plywood. You can use MDF as well, because we're not actually going to contact the material with the resin. We're going to cover this. So all I've done, I've drilled a central hole, and then I've put that on my screw chuck. And then with a parting tool, just cut a groove for the diameter of bowl that I want to make. That's then going to be infilled with some material called Foamex, which we're going to look at in a minute. Once I've done that, so we've got that nice groove running around the outside, and I'm not worried about tidying edges, that's not really important or part of it. Once I've done that, I'm going to start filling or covering that with a mould release tape. So Finley, if you can bring the camera over a little bit, just where I'm working just here. Okay. So all I'm going to do, this mould release tape basically means when the resin's set, I can break that out of the mould without having any problems. Just on that plywood on its own, you'll really struggle. In fact, you'll have to turn it off of the blank when done. So all I'm going to do is just roughly cover at the moment. We can cut it all away in a sec. So roughly cover the whole of the contact area. Okay, pop that to one side. Make sure it's stuck down nicely, and then we're just going to cut it away from the groove. There we are. So that's the contacts area. We're now going to, I've already cut this to size. So this is a piece of Foamex, basically sign writer's material, what you see signs made out of. It's a really nice pliable material, but I've cut that to length. Cut that to length already. All we need to do, again, is make sure that the actual join isn't going to come apart or leak. If you think about casting resin as your mould that you make has to be able to hold water. If it doesn't, resin will escape from it. So it's equally as important. So a little bit fiddly. Charlie, just hold that together for me. Handy having a couple of pairs of hands here, so I'm going to put tape over there. No, yeah, bust it together, that's it. There we go. Got it, thank you. There we are. Just around the other side. Now, that's okay, we can put that in there, that'll be fine, but you will still get leakage around here. So what we're going to add to that, a bit of silicone sealant. I'm out of clear silicone sealant. It doesn't matter what the colour is, to be quite honest, so we're just going to use a little bit of white. Oh. Bit more. As long as it seals the whole of that joint, don't worry about mess. Right, so now we can just slot in the Foamex, give it a good tight push down. There we are, so that one's ready. Now that silicone sealant will need to dry. That was the reason that I prepped this morning and we made this one. So this sealant now is nice and dry. I've also got the release tape in the bottom. A little bit of tissue to wipe my fingers. Now, I've already measured it. It's 125mm, 5 inches. So I've cut my template. To pop in there our piece of timber, that's the one I'm using, so I'm going to cut from there. What I want is the resin to be able to fill all these voids. So if I turn it over, we're going to mark out where we're going to cut this piece. And then we'll just take a quick trip to the bandsaw. There we are. So that's going to be my bowl blank. So if you follow me to the bandsaw now, we're just going to cut this and then fit it in there with our resin. So come on over. So a bit of noise now, but I'm just going to cut that blank out. There we are. So if I've done my calculations right, that should now be the right size to fit into the mould. Okay, you can see the lovely spikes here. Okay, back to the bench. Now we have to make sure as well that the debris that's on there, this isn't always going to be a clean finish. Get rid of as much as that as possible. I've already taken the bark off, but sometimes it just needs a little bit more persuasion. A wire brush just to take off the really soft areas. And that's going to help with our bond, of course. So there we are. Now, the next thing, I'm going to have a little bit more of my silicone sealant. I'm just going to hold that down. A little bit of silicone sealant, hot melt glue, either of that would be good enough. That can then just sit inside there. Push that down nice and firm. You mustn't forget, and this is a mistake I made at the very, very beginning, wood floats, and it'll still float in resin. So if you put your resin in, it'll get underneath it and push it up. So that's what that silicone sealant is for underneath. So there we are. So that's that mould ready. Whilst we're at it, I'll glue or silicone sealant in the other piece. It's always worth, if you're starting off in resin, start with small projects. Don't go too big too soon.
Quick question here.
Yeah.
Whereabouts can you get the mould release tape and the foam bits and bobs?
The Foamex, well, fortunately, I've got friends in the sign writing business, so I get all their offcuts basically before they get to the skip. But online, mould release tape and the Foamex, both online, all the regular places you're able to get that. Okay, so that's those two blanks ready. Okay, all ready. Now we need to mix. Okay, so we're going to use the casting resin, which is the flow cast, and this is a 2-to-1 mix. So in ratios, either measured by weight, in this case, either by weight or by volume. So we're going to choose the volume, and I'm just going to guess this one because I've got spare moulds waiting. So I'm going to start with the actual resin first. So part A, let's go to, I reckon we need to do about 600 mil. So I'm going to measure the resin to 400. There we are, 400, and then we're going to go to the hardener for an extra 200. Okay. Now I'm not going to keep the clear colour. I want to have some colour to it. So we're going to add a pigment as well. In this case, this is a blue pigment. And also, let's really go for it. I'm going to add a metallic as well. So be careful with pigment. It's easy to overdo it, and I want this to be translucent rather than a solid colour. So a little bit of pigment, and now a little bit of the metallic pigment as well. I think that should be ample. And we're going to give it a good mix in. So this is going to take a fair while. So I'm just using a piece of beach dowel here. Can the camera see that all right? Can you get in there? All right, so we're just going to give this a mix. Now, you can use a 2-pot method if you want to. Basically, a 2-pot method just helps to ensure that all the mixture is mixed. You always get a little bit of residue on the sides. So by mixing one pot and then pouring into a second pot should make sure that you have enough mixture and there's no soft areas. Let's have a look. No, I think that's quite a nice colour actually. We're not going to put any more of the metallic in, that's perfect. And it's also not going to be too solid either. Now, I'm not worried here about any bubbles whatsoever. You can play with bubbles if you want to. You can choose to leave bubbles in, or you can take bubbles out. So again, I'm not sure whether the camera will pick this up, but in this bowl, we've got two effects going on. Can you see the bubbles in that very well? You might see them better in this piece here. So this is a lamp. This is designed to reflect the bubbles as the light hits them. Okay, this has the same. This is a nighttime scene here, so this is supposed to be stars. On the other side, we've done a double mix. So I've poured Again, I don't know whether you can see that, but I've poured two colours in there, a blue then a yellow, so you get that sort of aurora look. So I'm not worried about bubbles. On those, I didn't dry them particularly slowly. It was at room temperatures, and I just let it dry naturally. On these two, these are going to be put in a pressure pot. So the pressure pot will get rid of the bubbles for me. It'll shrink those bubbles to a point where you can't see them. So if you want to do crystal clear castings or anything like that, that's what you'll need to do. If you don't have a pressure pot, and most people won't, then just leave them to dry at a normal pace. So I'm going to do couple more minutes on this. And then we're going to pour into the other tub and just keep mixing for a little bit longer. Drying time's another question that we're asked quite a lot. Drying time here, I'm going to need this week. So Friday, I'll take it out in the mould for you to see. That'll be fresh out the mould and ready to go. But it'll take about that long. For this sort of size, about 3 to 4 days would be about right. Right, there we go. So let's mix into another pot now. So I'm going to pour the whole of that mixture out and into there. I'm not scraping the sides. Let that dry. Now, reusing these pots is quite easily done. Once that's dry, that can be peeled out of there quite easily. So don't worry about wasting plastic pots. You won't need to. You will be able to pull them out because they're bendable. There we are. I think that's about there. Right. Let's get rid of my stirring stick. We're going to fill both of these. Okay, actually, no we're not. We're going to do one because the silicone sealant isn't dry on that one. Do one and I'll do the other one in a minute once that's dried a bit more. So, pouring in. And if you're doing bigger pours, it's probably best, to be quite honest, to do a sealing coat. River tables and that sort of thing will definitely require it. Otherwise, what you'll find is the air bubbles that actually come out are going to cause you problems. I'm just putting a little bit down the sides here. I don't want it to take away resin that's been poured in the main section. So a little bit out down the side. There we are. Let's fill that. Make sure we get that full coverage. That's perfect. Okay, put that to one side. I'll do the other one later on. So now let's look at leaving that to dry. So that's in the resin, that's in the moulds. That needs to be set aside. You can already see a little bit of those bubbles coming up. I don't want those in this. I want this one to be a nice clear one. So we're going to now use the pressure pot. So Finn, if you can just come back a little bit. Okay, so I want to leave this in there whilst it's drying. So I've just made a little cradle here just to make things easier. That one now can go carefully onto there. Okay, and then we can lift the whole thing into the pressure pot right the way down, and we'll pop the lid on. And we're going to be working, around about 30 psi, which works out to be just shy of 2 bar. Make sure everything's up nice and tight. Okay, so on with the compressor. Turn all the valves off. And I want that to set now till the end of the week on that 2 bar.
Can you use a heat gun to remove the bubbles?
You can absolutely use a heat gun to remove the bubbles. The heat gun works better on thinner surfaces. So yeah, it would work fine on this one, but you have to revisit your casting quite a few times before you leave it overnight. Definitely seal the grain first. That'll help with some of those big bubbles, and it'll encourage the lifting. But if it's a very thick casting, the heat just can't penetrate and draw those bubbles up. So I would say river tables, that sort of thing. Even this sort of size piece, this would be fine for a heat gun. That's waiting to be sanded. That sort of size piece would. But if you're casting thick like this, then pretty much it's pressure that you need to use. One other thing, if you're trying to stabilize timber, so for pen making, that sort of thing, you've heard of people using a stabilizing resin for things like very soft timbers, for corn cobs, all that sort of thing. Now that's done with vacuum, not pressure. The reason that we do that is vacuum draws the resin into it, so it actually replaces any of those air voids, and that makes that soft material very, very hard and turnable. So it's the difference between pressure and vacuum. Pressure shrinks the bubbles out of your eyesight. Vacuum draws the resin into the piece. Okay. We'll go over more of the actual turning of the resin on Friday when we make the bowl. But for now, that's going to live in there. I will do the other one. I think I'll do the other one without being in the pressure pot, and we'll have a look at the differences when they come out the molds, just to see if we can see any of those bubbles for you. Just a few other questions that I'm going to throw out there as well. I've been asked before, what's the best resin? Now, if we disregard makes, because there's a huge variety of makes out there, always go with casting resin, something that's made specifically for casting. Unless you're trying to do a countertop, then it's a countertop resin. Epoxy resin is where we're at. I've made so many mistakes using things like polyester resin and all those materials. Now the trouble with that is, as clear and as bright as they are, and a little bit quicker in drying and things like that, you will need a complete vapor mask. They are very pungent, and their structural strength, the join from the timber to the resin is not very good at all. It's quite a weak join. Epoxy's really sound. So if you're making a river table, there is no question, go for epoxy every single time. The difference between a casting resin and a countertop resin, if you want to make a solid colour, so you don't want a high shine on something, casting resin is perfect. If you want a sort of a semi-shine, you'll need to mechanically polish it, so water, polishing creams, all those sorts of things. If you want a finish straight out of the resin, so a real high shine, countertop resin, it's a self-leveling resin, and you will not have to polish it. It will be glass-like at the end. And certainly for river tables, you pour the resin on, allow it to run down the sides, wipe off the sides, and then just machine the bottom or sand the bottom to take out the drips. But that will be a glass-like finish at the end. So there is a big difference there. Other resins in this particular make, then you've got also the glow epoxy, which is a luminescent epoxy. So you've got a green or a blue luminous epoxy there. And then of course all the colour pigments, metallics and glitters. Glitters are slightly different to the metallic pigments. Metallic pigment actually is a pigment within the resin, where the glitter is suspended in the solution. So you sometimes get a little bit of settling of the glitter in the resin. I find this better on a countertop, because when there you can see right through it, or I find the metallics work better on a casting resin. Okay, so that's in there, that's all set and ready. I think I've exhausted my questions. I might think of a few more in a minute, and I'll ask them if I do. But let me just take you around the workshop. We're going to look at what we're going to do the rest of this week. We're purposely keeping them to about 40 to 45 minutes each of the demonstrations. And it's something for you to prepare for. So if you're interested in making wooden fruit or that sort of thing, then get the timbers ready. You can watch the video and you can get into your workshop and you can start making. So if we just pop over to the lathe first. So tomorrow, Tuesday, we're going to do one of the club favourites. So this is one that I've been demonstrating now for around about 20 years. On many different clubs, and this is the way as an apprentice I was taught how to make fruit. Lots of people use the screw chuck, but my method was using these jam chucks, so friction chucks. So we're going to use a jam chuck to finish the fruit off. So we've got some nice timbers. I've got some probably used Padauk tomorrow because it's a really pretty timber and a nice piece of oak. We're going to make one of these from start to finish, one of each of those from start to finish. That's going to involve turning between centres. And then we're sanding, sealing, then we're going to use the jam chucks or friction chucks to top and tail. We've got to think about drilling them out. We're going to turn some stems, so they're going to be turned on the lathe also. And then polishing. We're polished with polishing mops. Probably one of the easiest way. You won't find any polishing marks on them if you use a polishing mop. So look at the different compounds and also the glazing finish. So we're buffing oils with Archon auger wax as well. So that's tomorrow, that's Tuesday. And then if we move on to Wednesday, I get inspiration for all my travels all over the place. And one of the ones, again, around about 21 years ago, I went to France to do a show down there. And I met a wood turner called Thierry Martinon. And I brought back these pots. These are probably worth quite a lot of money now. They live in the kitchen. That one holds ginger and that one holds chestnuts. But I want to make these leaning pots. So they are just literally that. There's a small flat on the bottom, and even got Thierry's signature on the bottom still. So he's a fantastic carver, by the way. Now he's moved on from turning into carving. But what I'd like to do, this is my sort of interpretation, half done. I've done a couple earlier on or last week. This is a nice piece of apple here. We've done some lines in that and some that's an unknown timber. I'm not quite sure what that one is. But then they're to be finished later on. But what I'm going to do is we'll start from a piece of this. This is a piece of burr walnut. This is wet. We're going to turn the whole piece. We're going to hollow it out with the Woodcut ProMaster. So if you're unsure about using hollowing tools, we're going to use one of these bad boys here. Hollow it out, and there's been a lot of work holding on the lathe options for you as well to look at. Again, go through the week. Please ask questions. You know, the more questions you get, the more interactivity we get, the nicer it is for us to know that there's actually people watching and enjoying what we're doing. So then on to where are we at? We're at Thursday then, aren't we? So Thursday we're going to go on to a smaller piece, and we're going to look at a couple of different sets of jaws and how we make these offset pendants. It might be worth sending in your opinion as to whether you want me to do one out of resin or whether you want me to do just a solid timber. So I've got some nice timbers, including some nice spalted beeches, some bur oaks, or we've got some lovely resin encapsulating Banksia nuts here. So I've got some blanks made with Banksia nuts, which will look quite interesting. I've got pine cones in this one. You can see casting pine cones here. They're encapsulated in some green resin. Again, we can make a pendant out of the pine cone. We've got some bur oak with a mixture of colours. So there's all sorts of things we can do here. I've got plenty of resin and blanks ready to turn into our pendants. And then, of course, when you come back to me on Friday, we're going to break the mould. We're going to take the bowl blank out of the pressure barrel, and we're going to turn a small bowl out of that one. So fingers crossed. In the meantime, if you're looking for bowl blanks, we've just brought in a whole new range of native timber bowl blanks. So we've got things like sycamore, beech, we've got ash. It's all sorts of homegrown timbers from the UK. And if you're struggling at home to get the kiddies involved, then go to our Beat the Boredom section of the Axminster website. There's lots of new kits there, some ideas for making things at home with the kiddies. Just to literally beat the boredom. So thanks again, guys. This has been Colwin Way from the Skills Centre at Home live videos. I hope you enjoyed it. If you do, give me a thumbs up. Ask any questions if we haven't got to them today. still keep asking the questions, and we'll answer them tomorrow and as the week progresses. Until then, stay safe, and I'll see you tomorrow.